Yes. Alrighty, let's get started. So, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good, well, depending on where you're connecting from. We hope you're having a good day. We're here tonight to celebrate the world entrepreneurial food tech talent that actually tackled one of, I think, the biggest issues in our food system, which is food waste. And we're super thrilled to welcome an amazing lineup of speakers that we carefully selected, and this will be our last webinar of this series. But without further ado, let me just jump straight into a little bit of the agenda of tonight's webinar. We're going to give you a very brief introduction about the FoodTech 500, as all the amazing folks that are going to be hearing from actually were lucky enough in a way, or or actually great enough to get into this year FoodTech 500. And without that, spending too much time, I'm going to let them tell you more about their company, and we're going to open the panel discussion, which will be moderated by our friend Joseph Gridley from Soil Association. And then we'll open it to Q&A and final remarks. So we'll ask you kindly to start putting your questions as they pop to your mind into the group chat, and then we will basically try to take as many as we can. But very briefly about Forward Fooding, I'm the Alessio, founder and CEO of Forward Fooding. Our mission is very simple: is to foster food innovation to redesign our food system. The way we do it is through a platform that we built over the years, which is called the Food Data Navigator, which helps to map out the ecosystem, and we study through that all the connections between the ecosystem players, with the view of basically creating a sort of a hyper-connected, layer that can help to foster this innovation. So on the one hand, we work with large corporates to help them to get access to companies and accelerators that they could work with. On the other hand, we work with all the other ecosystem stakeholders, including investors, to scout companies, to help them understand the composition of the landscape and the ecosystem, and to really connect basically these parties. Uh, very briefly about the Food Data Navigator, which is the data intelligence platform that I mentioned earlier. It basically now counts about 11,000 plus actually ecosystem actors, including startups and scale-up companies, ecosystem enablers, accelerators, and international incubators, investors, including primarily institutional investors, VCs, and business angels, and corporate venture capital. This is also to give you a little bit of the size of the space, if you will, they were talking about, which of course, it might be even bigger than this, but as far as our data is concerned, we've been mapping effectively about 11,000 plus actors, and really study all the different connections among them. Just some key numbers about our network. We work with about 20 corporate clients, and we've run about 35 strategy projects that we've completed up to date. We work with about 5 Fortune 500 companies. We have mapped, thanks to our data intelligence platform, about 5,600 startups and scale-up companies in this space. This doesn't include effectively companies that have already exited or went IPO, or they're basically too early to even be in a formation stage. We have built 2 innovation hubs, one in London and one in Barcelona, which I'm actually where I'm taking this Falcon from. And we have now about actually 18 resident companies between the 2 hubs. And with the FoodTech 500, we have received about more than 3,200 applications from startup and scale-up companies over the last 2 years, which is basically when we started the FoodTech 500. These are some of our supporter partners and clients. We blend them into one place, as again, as I mentioned earlier, we try to hyper connect them, and being able to identify opportunities for collaborations among them. But basically, this was all to get to the FoodTech 500, which, as I mentioned earlier, was a project that we kickstarted in 2019 with the view of creating, or with the aim of creating, really the sort of a Fortune 500 list of agri-food tech companies, so the companies to watch. But the idea being really that we wanted to shine the spotlight on all the latest developments that agri-food tech innovators were creating, and really try to help people understand and wrap their head around how impactful, they can be to changing basically our food system. And so here we're really about, we built it really with the view of celebrating, the talent behind this ecosystem. And then we went, a bit more in details about each vertical to identify effectively leading companies in each of the, let's say, 8 macro categories that we use to map out the agri-food tech ecosystem. But then most specifically, the basically areas where we see that a lot of tech and innovation are creating an impact at a systemic level. The scoring mechanism behind the FoodTech 500 is rather simple. The business size score and the digital footprint score actually come from our Food Data Navigator. They are both algorithm led, and they basically are respectively a proxy of the business size of the business in terms of number of employees, number of offices where they operate from, and the amount of funding they've also raised. The digital footprint score instead is actually a representation of how much traffic they have over their website and over social media, and how fast they're actually growing over social media. When it comes to the sustainability score, which is also another variable that we added in also the very first edition, we actually, in absence of a framework that we felt was appropriate to calculate the sustainability impact of the companies, we actually have outsourced the creation of this to a partner of ours, which come from the academia world. And it was all based around the SDGs. So we asked the companies to effectively, through a survey, to provide us with information about what type of agenda in terms of sustainability they have in place. And we have basically connected it to the SDGs and how they were contributing with their solution to solving the basically top 3 SDGs that they've picked. But as I said, we couldn't be able to do this without the support of our partners and the collaborators. So our technical partner is Data Scout, which is also the company that helped us to build the Food Data Navigator. And University of Turin is the collaboratory that we have developed the sustainability scoring with. Our sponsor, NEOM, and Rotterdam Enterprises allowed us to actually make also some of these webinars happen, but also they've supported us from the very beginning to actually get behind the entrepreneurial talents that we're showcasing through the FoodTech 500. And our media partners, again, have helped us to basically reach every single corner of the world to get companies to apply in the first place, and therefore showcasing the results that they've achieved through the ranking. Some key numbers really briefly. For this edition alone, we have received more than 2,000 applications from international agri-food tech startups and scale-up companies covering the whole value chain. So from ag tech all the way through consumer apps and even beyond the point of consumption. We've covered about 63 countries in terms of application received by companies, and about 52 in terms of companies that have actually made it into the listing. Up to date, we have received 750 plus page views on the website alone from about 80,000 visitors from 170 plus countries. And we're very pleased to share that also we have received already 550 companies in terms of applications for the 2021 edition, which will basically be published next year as the listing for this year. In terms of really key highlights of the numbers behind the ranking. So out of 500 companies, as I mentioned, we've represented about 52 countries. The companies as a cluster have raised more than 4.1 billion in funding. 374 of them are revenue generating, and 423 have received investment already. So as much as we think, this is a representative, if you will, of the ecosystem, we're still talking about a small cluster of 500 companies that, in our view, however, this number speaks by themselves, as in saying how much impact they've already created, and the probably amount of jobs also that as with their companies were able to create, given that most of them are revenue generating and they've already raised finance. But one thing that I really want to stress out here is the fact that it's a very diverse group of talent. And here I'm really pleased to share that this year edition, 25.2% of the companies were actually female founded, and about in total, if we combine BEM, people with disability, and LGBT plus, we are talking about 43%. So almost half of this cluster of companies is very diverse in our view. And this year we really wanted to dig deeper into these variables as well. So we asked the companies to kindly share with us the stats. And we think that is very representative of the fact that this ecosystem is growing so fast, also because it's a lot more diverse than any other tech, if you will, that it's where the numbers are very different from what I'm showing you. Off the back of basically the listing this year, we try to go above and beyond to give as much visibility as possible to the companies that made into it. So we have developed actually about 18 different reports that dig deeper into specific verticals and specific micro category of the ecosystem, which are available on our website, forwardfooding.com/reports. And this is that they actually feature exclusive interviews with the founders, and it's really to really get the kind of full picture beyond just what the solution of the company is all about. And without further ado, I would actually hand it over to Joseph, who's gonna introduce our speakers tonight.
Yes, good evening, good morning, good afternoon, everybody. Very nice to be with you all, and thank you very much, Alessio, for inviting me along. We're really joined by the A team of the food waste, the food surplus businesses from all corners of the world today, and it's great to have such an amazing panel because the problem is huge. I think sometimes we forget that even a decade ago, the stats around food waste weren't really on everybody's lips. Not everybody knew that we waste a third of all the food we produce. That if it was a country, it would be the third largest emitter. All of these things are stuff that we've learned in the last couple of years. And it's companies like the ones you'll meet today that have been at the front line of tackling those problems and hopefully shrinking those numbers so that our children and our children's children have a very different reality. Just before I introduce the panel, so you know who I am, Joseph Gridley. I've been working with startups, investing in them, supporting them for the last 6-7 years, and really trying to prove that you can build a healthier, more sustainable food system and make money at the same time. Those things don't have to be mutually exclusive. And now just started my own venture, trying to help farmers across the UK transition to regenerative agriculture and get paid for doing it. But less about me, more about the people we've got here. So it's with great pleasure that I introduce our panel, 5 people. We've got Jenny Du from Appeal. She's the co-founder and vice president of operations. We've got Jamie Crummy, the co-founder and director of Too Good To Go. David Catt, business development from Wasteless. Christine Molesley, the founder and CEO of Full Harvest. And David Jackson, the director of marketing and public affairs at Winnow. Hello, everybody. Why don't we give the audience just a quick 2-minute introduction of what each of your businesses does so they know as much as I do about the brilliant things you're doing. Jenny, do you want to kick us off?
Sure. Thanks, everyone, for making time to join us from all around the world. So what Appeal Science is founded back in 2012, inspired by that FAO 2011 report that first came out reporting on food waste. And so what we do is we take the edible parts of the food that we already eat today, use that to reinforce the natural skin or peel of fresh fruits and vegetables in order to retain moisture, reduce oxidation, ultimately extend shelf life of fresh produce. So for us, it's all about what can we gain by giving everyone a little bit more time to enjoy the bounty from our harvest. So that's we'll have a chance to dig into it a little bit more, but that is in essence what Appeal Sciences does.
Thanks very much. Jamie, over to you at Too Good To Go.
Yeah, thank you very much for the introduction there, Joe. And it's a pleasure really to be on a panel, as everybody says, with this A team of food tech businesses. It's good fun to be in good company. So a bit about ourselves here at Too Good To Go. We're a social impact company, a B Corp, which is all about fighting food waste. Put simply, we have a mobile app which connects consumers with businesses who have surplus food for sale. So it's all about creating a tangible solution through technology to ensure that perfectly good food doesn't go to waste. Now, we work with over 100,000 different food businesses across 15 global markets. That's in Europe and the USA, with over 36 million users who collectively have rescued just shy of 70 million meals from going to waste in the past 5 to 6 years. So it really is, the tip of the iceberg in terms of the impact that we want to have. But as I say, a very simple and effective way for us all to start fighting food waste together.
Amazing. Thank you, Jamie. David, coming to you for your introduction.
Yeah, thanks, Joseph. So it's so tying into to what everyone said. It's great to be here. It's great to have so many companies as well as the audience that want to make an impact at scale with a profit. So what Wasteless does is we prevent food waste. We help retailers optimize the markdowns of fresh products in retail and give you, the consumer, a incentive to buy a product with a shorter expiration date. So we're a data for food company that is able to make a retailer perform a lot better. So we can actually improve margins by 25%, improve revenues by 40%. But the best thing is that we actually incentivize consumers to buy a perfectly good product that you're going to eat very soon and pay less for it, because there's no time to waste.
Brilliant stuff. Thank you, David. Christine, coming to the west coast of the USA.
Thank you. Yeah, it's awesome to be connected with all of you guys around the world solving this, because it's such a big problem and there's just so many pieces to it across the supply chain. We specifically are one of the only companies solving this specifically at the farm level. So I saw firsthand a lot of waste coming from the supply chain and food industries, and launched in 2016 Full Harvest. And we're the first B2B marketplace for farms to sell their surplus and imperfect produce to food and beverage companies that don't need to care what produce looks like. So to date, we have sold almost 40 million pounds of produce that has helped farmers make incremental money, buyers save money and time, all while digitizing the supply chain and solving food waste. So win, win, win.
What we like to hear. Win, win, win. And David, finally, to London in the UK. Tell us about Winnow.
Thanks. So also great to be here with such a fantastic panel. So at Winnow, we develop artificial intelligence tools to help chefs in big kitchens like staff restaurants, hotels, cruise ships, casinos, and retailers to run more profitable and sustainable kitchens by cutting food waste in half. So we launched in London in 2013 in a single staff restaurant. Fast forward to 2021, we're in over 1,400 kitchens in about 40 countries, have operations or offices in Singapore, Shanghai, Dubai, Romania, and also in Chicago in the US. And collectively, the chefs using our tools are saving around about 36 million meals every year from the bins. So we're also like Too Good To Go. We're a registered B Corporation, and we really exist to try and solve this problem in the hospitality sector.
Nice. Thank you very much. So as you can hear, we really do have a diverse and wonderful group of entrepreneurs here. They're working from farm to home, B2B, B2C. They're in restaurants, hotels, out in the countryside. They're touching all parts of this problem of food waste. But what it feels to me is that one thing that kind of joins you up is that you've all been enabled by technology, technologies that probably didn't exist a decade ago. And I'd love to dig into that a little bit more. What was the technology that made what you're doing possible? I'm going to shake up the order. So I'm going to come to Christine first.
Mm-hmm. What does our technology do to enable the farmers?
Exactly. What was the technological innovation that made Full Harvest possible?
Yeah, we view ourselves as both a technology and an innovation company, but our core is the technology, which is a B2B marketplace. So it's the first digitization of the supply chain of produce, connecting farmers to food companies that to sell sustainable produce. So the innovation was taking hundreds of year old process with paper and pen and over the phone and fax machine in 2021. And bringing it online, which you saw during COVID, that unfortunately, due to the offline nature, it just caused even more food to go to waste and even more people to go hungry, just because it's close to impossible to quickly, rapidly shift supply demand offline. And the needs of 2021 around food safety and traceability are just not possible in that way. So we critically need to digitize the supply chain. And then on the innovation side, we're working with some of the largest food companies in the world to actually capture rescued produce from farms and put them in their sustainable products to market to consumers, given that the number one trend of consumer relevance in food right now is waste reduction, and number two, sourcing responsibly.
Nice. And it's that annoying thing of like it makes so much sense that this has been done. What do you think it kind of stopped it happening before? Like what enabled you to get this success?
Yeah, you just have to look at the existing supply chain. And in the US specifically, where we're hyper-focused just because it's one of the largest offenders, is that 85 to 90% of food and beverage companies go through brokers and distributors, and 75% of those are 20 employees or less. And so mom and pop shops that are offline, highly fragmented, never will really become tech companies. And then the other 25% of those brokers, distributors have the opposite problem, where it's the massive companies, the US Foods, Cisco's, Sodexo's of the world, where they have ingrained processes and focus on food service and number one product and offline somewhat practices, and also very difficult for them to become a technology company. So it's really just inherent in the system, and it takes, like it has in other industries, outsiders, entrepreneurs to innovate and disrupt with technology.
Nice, thank you. So from farm, let's go right to the other end of the supply chain, and to you, David. You are working right in supermarkets, directly with consumers and retailers. Tell us about the technology that makes wasteless possible.
So we're using artificial intelligence, and actually we're using a brand of that's called reinforcement learning. And this is something that no one was actually able to do just a couple of years back. Just the computing power wasn't there. So we're a data for food company. The founders actually sold their data for food enterprise to AB InBev, the biggest beer brewer in the world. And we realized that making a big brewer richer isn't our goal in life, especially since there's such a massive problem in the food system, which is food waste. And we then digged in, and we saw that in grocery retail, about 90% of all food waste is caused by products running out of expiration date. And when you're a data scientist, you hear the word date, you think there might actually be a data solution to it as well. So that's actually what we did. If you go to your local supermarket tonight, Joseph, if you go to your Tesco's, you're back in London now, so great. You're probably happy to go back there again. And you're gonna pick up a ready-made salad that you're gonna eat tonight. And you see two items. One has a April 25th date, and the other one has an April 22nd date. So invariably, you're going to pick the longer date because there's no incentive to actually buy the product that is going to expire tomorrow, but you're going to eat it tonight. So what we do is we find the optimal price point, which is very difficult in retail. It's extremely difficult. The optimal price point that makes it interesting for a retailer to sell it with a really good margin, and for you to buy it with a really good discount. That's what we do.
Nice. And how have you found consumers to be kind of receptive to this idea? Is it something that made perfect sense, or is it uphill battle?
No one understands why it wasn't there already, of course, which is business as usual in retail, in food is really, really rough. It's a crazy industry because it's so siloed. Consumers don't accept that anymore. So we're seeing that where when we have two products, two dates, two prices, that in those cases, 41% of sales are on average are on a product with a shorter expiration date at a lower price. So actually, if you're going to eat it, so people actually make a conscious decision. Am I going to eat it tonight or tomorrow night? Or am I shopping for the weekend and want it in the back of my fridge? If you want it in the back of your fridge, you're going to pay a premium for something that's just as good, but slightly fresher. And if you're going to eat it tonight, you're actually going to do something that's really good for your wallet, as well as for the planet.
Nice. Thank you very much, David. Jenny, Appeal, I guess you guys are, one of the more sciencey of the companies we've got here today. I mean, you're all doing sciencey things, but Appeal are all over the science journals for the technology that you've got to extend kind of fruit and veg shelf life. Can you tell us a little bit around, the journey that your technology's gone on and now what it's doing?
Yeah, thanks so much. I would say, we kind of first look at like, hey, it's crazy that we throw this much away. And it's such a, I don't know, maybe like a naive like revelation at the time, because it's not an issue about can we grow and produce enough food? It's like, how do you, better match, supply and demand? How do you give everything more time? Like as folks have talked about here. So for us, it was inspired first by just asking a bunch of naive questions, like what are the primary drivers of spoilage, from a plant physiology level? You can have your biological based stressors like fungal and the like, but you can also have what we call abiotic stressors, water loss and exposure to oxygen. And so it was again a simple question from there. Well, how do plants protect themselves? And at some point, if we were all like underwater and plants evolved to be on the surface of the earth, well, it's actually through the formation of that peel. And then you start to ask like, what makes, like a lemon maybe last longer than the strawberry? What can we teach, each other? And so that's really where the idea for, using the materials that are found in the plants that we already eat to reinforce the natural peel. And, for us, I think the opportunity was in that some of the existing post-harvest technologies anyways, just hadn't maybe evolved, that far compared to some of the things we do pre-harvest, in the field, for example. There's a heavy reliance on the availability of a cold chain, so the ability to basically refrigerate at all steps along the way. Or some of existing edible coatings may be added more for the purpose of shine than entirely for shelf life extension. And so what we've been able to bring forward through think of it, this extra little peel that can carry its way with the produce really end to end. So either at the grower or packing house level where the product is applied, but then throughout its transportation through to display on retail, often, at ambient temperature, not necessarily, kept in a refrigerated room unless you're maybe shopping at a Costco in the US and you actually walk into a cold chamber. And then, into your homes where where produce actually has like optimal conditions that's optimized ideally along different points in the supply chain. Like we go into our fridges and our countertops, which is really just kind of like one condition. And so I would say, that for us has been, the piece about an end-to-end supply chain solution. And for us starting there now with, call it this, an edible coating technology, but really thinking about the information that we gain at all these different points in the supply chain with respect to quality and freshness, the availability, and exactly to Christine's point, it's a very traditional industry, and how information, is or isn't transferred. You have some folks with, long ways to go. It's same thing. We get orders by text message or by email. And so we see an opportunity to actually, bring forward in the near future a little bit more of that, the data element also, to helping improve that more perfect match of supply and demand.
Nice. Thank you very much. I guess, similar to the primary producers in the food supply chain that have traditionally been not particularly technological. Having worked as a chef, I can guarantee that it's another area that, at least until very recently, has been far from technology. And David, you guys at Winnow are stepping into that space. You've had quite a journey. You've been around probably one of the longest here of the teams. Talk us about the different iterations of your technology and where it is today.
So good to hear that you've got some kitchen experience, Joseph. I think the insight that I would give, and some of the kind of themes around kind of pen and paper, you know, at the farm that Christine was kind of sharing are really relevant in the kitchen as well. So 10 plus years ago, you know, you might, and even in many kitchens still today, if you ask a chef, you know, are you measuring your food waste, you might get a response back saying, yeah, absolutely, we have these waste sheets, we write down exactly what we're wasting at the end of every service. And we would ask those chefs, and what do you do with that information? And this is a real response that would come back as well. We keep them in this binder, but the binder's just sitting there in the office, in the kitchen, right? And so I think with all of our different kind of solutions across the food system, food waste is just really difficult to measure, right? And I'm not being disparaging of chefs, because it's a really difficult job, right? We say that chefs are often being asked to make incredibly complex forecasting decisions in stressful environments with imperfect information. So our job as a technology company is to try and make that as easy and as simple and as straightforward as possible, because frankly, recording food waste is probably number 13 on the list of priorities for a chef who, you know, half the team haven't turned up, or there's a new order that's come in, or there's a piece of equipment that's broken, or now there's the pandemic and there are health and safety issues that have to be dealt with, and there's demand fluctuation, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So it's a really difficult environment to operate in. The first iteration of our product was a digital scale that was connected by Bluetooth to a tablet, and it would keep a constant reading of the weight of the bin, and a chef would throw something away, and then they'd identify manually on the tablet, we just threw away tomatoes. And so with the weight, the cost that we would keep in the cloud, and then the item, we'd know that was just, you know, $5 worth of tomatoes. Exactly to David's point though, the intention with Winnow was always to be an AI company. In 2013, the tech just wasn't there. The computing power wasn't there, so it'd be very slow to run those transactions, and the algorithms just weren't good enough to be able to learn and give accurate results. And we launched Winnow Vision, our AI product, in 2019 after 2 years of development with IKEA. So we work all over the world with IKEA. Eventually, you'll go into any IKEA in the world and they'll have this technology in the back of house. And what the system does is, as well as capturing the weight, there's an image that's taken, and we could then harvest those images, and we train a computer vision algorithm, which is the same type of technology that you would have in a driverless car, to recognize what's being thrown away. And the kind of long-term aspiration is that we then get so good at that we can actually kind of then record exactly what's being thrown away, and we can give teams analytics to be able to understand where they're making too much. And we know, having done this now for, you know, kind of coming on to 9 years, that if we do that well, and we provide insights, the chefs can typically cut the food waste in half within about 6 to 12 months. And that's ultimately the way that, in our small slither of the food system, that will have a really big impact.
Amazing. Yeah, a huge impact, both financially, I imagine, for restaurants that are almost always on their knees,
exactly,
and for the issue of food waste. And Jamie, you're working with restaurants, but not just restaurants as well, and you've really leveraged technology to go global, with about 70 million meals having been saved. Talk us through what sits at the heart of Too Good To Go, and how it all works.
Sure, Joe, would be my pleasure. I mean, just to recap on how the platform works and what it is, you know, it's a marketplace effectively. It's a B2C marketplace, which is connecting individuals with businesses that have surplus food for sale. And these businesses range anyone from your local cafe through to sort of high street coffee chains, supermarkets and retailers, and now even food producers as well to some extent. And at the heart of this is around making it operationally simple, but technologically simple as well. And that is something that we hold incredibly close to our cultural DNA, but the way in which we operate as well, which is around making a complicated thing, which is food waste, as simple as possible. And I think David's just touched on there as to some of the hurdles that people working in hospitality, but this applies across the food the food sector as well. Is people tend to be starved of time, and there's 101 things in which they need to be doing. So what we have is a simple platform which allows businesses to use Too Good To Go as a safety net for any of that unavoidable surplus food. And what that means is it allows individuals, it allows consumers to rescue food at a discounted price of food which would otherwise go to waste. So I think it was someone else on the panel who was talking about this win-win mantra, and this is something that we very much embody at Too Good To Go as well. When we talk about the platform, it's a win for the individual, it's a win for the consumer as they're able to discover new foods and discover new flavors through the platform itself. But it's a win for the businesses too. They're able to recover sunk costs, they're able to recover waste disposal costs, and not have to throw food away. I can't think of any other sort of business or industry in which throws their core product away on a daily basis at such scale. But ultimately, it's a win for the planet as well. So as you mentioned earlier, Joe, just the environmental implications of food waste, our simple technology, our simple platform, this marketplace around surplus food really allows us to have a tangible impact on food waste reduction.
Nice. Thank you, Jamie. And question back to you and maybe to the wider group. It sounds like a lot of your technologies, your companies have come about because people are fundamentally not putting a high enough value on food. We've got used to food being cheap, and there are reports that say for every pound or dollar we spend on food, there is another pound or dollar of hidden costs that the consumer doesn't pick up, but somebody else does. In your case, Jamie, how much do you think, whilst cheap food exists, food waste is going to be an inevitability?
I think, to unpack that question a bit further, I think, one of the things you've touched on is this disconnect from food itself and really recognizing the true value of food. If we go back, if we go back centuries before this, our relationship with food was very much of one of a. Hello.
Sorry, I think, yeah.
Apologies there, guys. But yeah, our relationship with food was one of of survival, and it still is to an extent, right? We look at food as this fuel to keep us alive, this fuel to develop us, and this fuel to grow us. But at the same time, food is this social glue which brings us all together. It's food which is, as the pandemic is and the restrictions are being lifted here in the UK, it's food which is bringing people together outside. It's something which is, this social makeup of society. Yet somewhere along the way, this value of food is being lost, and it's through the platform itself and through what we're trying to achieve with Too Good To Go is to readdress this and actually get people to start thinking about that true value of food, and recognizing it as a resource which we should value as opposed to throwing away. I think it is, it's at that heart, which is changing these mindsets and changing these behaviors as well, because the issue of food waste is such a systemic problem that it's not just a blame on the consumer, a blame on the individuals, but what we can do is empower people and empower them to make a difference within their daily lives.
Yeah, I wanna tie into that, if that's okay to you, Joseph.
Take it away.
So great remark, Jamie. So the thing is that not only are we disconnected from our food, the food system is disconnected. So because it's from the farm all the way to the fork, and no one actually sees that just the waste is piling up. If this would be in one factory, a Mercedes-Benz factory, it wouldn't hold. But just because it's so distributed. So there's a great report that I quote from a lot from BCG. It's about 2 years ago, and they actually saw that food waste is a big problem, and they actually put a dollar amount to it. But actually, about 80% of it is also an opportunity, and one of the biggest opportunities is in actually cooperating. It's in sharing data. So the thing that we think is extremely important is to not perpetuate the problem, but actually solve it. So we're using our data not just to incentivize consumers to take action, but also to create a demand side, a demand-driven system. Very much what David Jackson was referring to. You need a demand-driven system where a too good to go box actually makes, when it's sold, it makes the retailer smarter, and it helps the retailer optimize the supply, and that needs to be done. And it's and the BCG says it's an opportunity that can actually garner the industry some $600 billion dollars. So it needs to be done. It can be done. It will be done, because that this is it's really uncalled for what's happening. It's the cost of food waste to the planet is $4 trillion. The total value of food, of the food economic system, is just $12 trillion. So it's like really the damage that we're doing is just so tremendously big. And that's why it's great to have all these innovators together. And we should really be working together a lot more. Hopefully, if I have an opportunity in this call, I'll make a more emphatic call to actually to come together and put our weight behind getting towards a solution. And David Jackson is nodding because he knows what I'm talking about.
Nice. Thank you very much, David. And yeah, I hope that happens. And I think, for me, food waste, it does feel like a pre-competitive space. This isn't, a thing that, one group of hotels should be doing and not another. This is something that everyone has to bake into their DNA before they even take a product or a service to market. Coming to you, Jenny, obviously everyone feels, I guess, the pinch of food waste, but particularly smaller producers of food, farmers who maybe don't have a big acreage. And you guys, you obviously had your very famous $250 million raise about a year ago or so. And then you've raised a specific bit of money, an additional 30 million to work with smallholder farmers. And I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit more about that and what your plans are for that, because it's really interesting.
Cool, thanks so much. Yeah, it's exciting for us because it brings us a little bit back to the roots of our founding, and with that original Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation grant, and that was originally related to technologies to reduce post-harvest loss and waste in sub-Saharan Africa. So it's awesome, I think, for the opportunity to have a way to focus more specifically ultimately in emerging markets. A lot of our work today is, serving like US-based, retailers and consumers, and EU-based retailers and consumers, although through the supplier network. And if we look to where our produce really comes from, it is staggeringly from, what would be defined as emerging markets. So it's kind of I would say, kind of like a phased approach, how do we help with growers, packers in places like, for us right now, that counts as Mexico, Peru, Chile, Costa Rica, Kenya, for example, grow the volumes, because they're often aggregating from smallholders. A lot of the growers, for example, can be quite like fragmented, and then getting quality to a point where they can reach a higher value export market. And that's just where it aligns with kind of serving our core customer base today, but then the intention is to grow that to also open up the domestic market opportunities, and yeah, ultimately trying to find a way to get a home, for a lot of that produce in the from our smallholders. So that's really the intention of the International Finance Corporation funding, directed to a focus for growth in emerging markets.
Nice. And I guess it adds another win to the win-win-win that so many of your businesses are delivering, right? I love the kind of holistic change that so many of you are creating, whether it's better livelihoods, better planet. It's really exciting. Christine, I imagine, as with all new businesses, there's a kind of a behavior change curve, particularly for farmers who are, traditionally slower to change and adopt new things. Can you tell us a little bit how it's been getting, farmers interested in full harvest and what their experience with you has been?
Sure. Yeah. I think it's interesting because since I've been, doing this for 5 years, and early days and people thought I was crazy, I feel like the outside world, everybody I engage with thinks that the biggest challenge is getting farmers to use technology. It's actually not. When you come to them with something that is free and is going to within minutes help them significantly improve their revenue and make it a no-brainer, they're falling over themselves to try to, come and, to try to find solutions and work with you. And so, we built a name that when we used to go to produce conferences, people couldn't give us their business card fast enough. They're like, please help us. About 65% of growers in the US are on the verge of bankruptcy. It's one of the toughest careers in the world. And so, I was going to add to what you guys were saying earlier is that part of the issue too is you just have to look at human behavior around incentives and consequences, and it's all about incentive. We take the positive approach of trying to incentivize people now before we have to deal with the absolute dire consequences. We're already starting to deal with them because it's going to be one or the other, right? And so we've got to hustle to incentivize people to change so that we can prevent that. And so, otherwise it's going to be, we're going to have no choice, to deal with that. So, that's how I built the business, was really thinking about, who are my customers and what is the biggest thing I can do to incent solving the pain points to get them to change. And if you do that properly, you can pretty much do, anything really. And so, we knew that they were desperate for incremental sales, and they didn't have channels, or they were spending hours or days on the phone if they had time, which they usually don't, to sell this. They don't have access to markets, and they're very localized usually too sometimes. So they don't know, what else is going on in the country and who else might be interested. And it's all about that. They would have been data starved and lack of access to accessibility. And COVID just, made it that much more of a push. Now that is, you've seen on the B2C side, digitization going through the roof. I think that's a leading indicator. And it's been a push on the business side too, that, man, we can't do this offline. So I think, it's coming. We're part of that revolution. You guys are too. And I think that, I don't think we should be making excuses or just assuming the worst here and saying, oh, this is going to be difficult or it's not possible. I'm an entrepreneur. I think anything's possible. So it's just about getting it done and solving the problem because it's too huge and too urgent. So, yeah.
Yeah. And how, the last year has been a strange place for everybody. How has things like coronavirus and lockdown impacted kind of uptake on one side of the marketplace or offtake on the other? Have you seen some interesting changes? To you, Christine, to follow on.
Yeah, just to add to what I was saying, I think that, it was just a wake-up call. We, have been fortunate and very grateful that we've been able to not only help during a time of need, we've helped farmers that were having a hard time selling product during COVID. to also start working with supplying nonprofit boxes that have fed over 250,000 people in the US during COVID that were going hungry, with Salesforce and World Central Kitchen and Eat, Learn, Play Foundation. So, and on top of that, it's, you know, been a net positive for us and our business. It's just pushed people to even faster to realize that they need to, you know, start adopting technology. So not to say that there weren't, you know, slight impacts with labor issues due to COVID, you know, within the industry as a whole, but, you know, overall it's been a net positive and, you know, just helping us to accelerate even faster.
Great, thank you. All of you guys, I guess, are focused on big social and environmental impact, which is exactly what we need when the issues are this big. One of the things that caught my attention, Jamie, was that you guys at Too Good To Go you've got your core offer, which is really you know, the platform, the marketplace, and then you've recently started doing more and more work in public affairs, which is an interesting kind of second arrow to your bow. And I was wondering if you could tell us, you know, why you started working there and some of the work you're doing.
Yeah, it would be my pleasure, and I think you frame it quite nicely there. We all have these huge aspirations to have a massive impact from a food waste perspective. And, you know, the numbers I've said earlier, you know, we've rescued 70 million meals in just around 5 years. And that's fantastic, but it is just the tip of the iceberg. And, you know, what we really want to be able to do is to develop and contribute to a movement around food waste in which we're all fighting food waste together, and we're inspiring and empowering one another to do this. So, you know, at the core of this is this notion of collaboration, which is, you know, fantastic to be on a panel with so many amazing and inspiring people that, you know, we can collaborate and work together to try and tackle this issue. But essentially what I mean by that is we need to go further. Our marketplace can do some amazing and wonderful things, and it's a tool which gives people a tangible platform in which to fight food waste. But we want to do things outside of this, and it's this platform which essentially allows us to explore ways in which to have a greater impact in areas like education, greater impact in households, with businesses, and in public affairs space as well. So one of the things we've been doing of late is launching a campaign around date labels. So you know, I think quite a few of us have mentioned that today, but in Europe, 10% of all the food that is wasted is a result of this confusion between a best before date and a use by date. So what we've been doing here is working with businesses across the food value chain to communicate that we should look, smell, and taste food once it's gone beyond its best before date, with the ambition to really shake up our food system, to change the way in which our food labels are being used across the globe. On top of this, you know, we'll be you know, hoping to have a big presence at places like COP26, where, you know, we can try and push an agenda of you know, really shaking up our food system globally, because the number one take home for myself from the sessions today is to echo the message that fighting food waste is the number one most impactful and simple solution that we can take to reverse the effects of climate change. So actually using platforms like COP26 to push this message further, so that we really can achieve you know, this vision of a planet with no food waste.
Yeah. So Jamie was quoting, I think, from Project Drawdown, which everyone should read and visit, because indeed it's really, food waste is the number one impactful measure against our carbon footprint. The thing is, our customers, and Christine pointed this out, aren't really interested in green. I mean, they're not interested in planet green, they're interested in dollar green. And we have to always, and this is why I like being with these entrepreneurs on this panel so much, we have to always keep in mind that our customers, and especially the consumers that they serve, are going to get a good deal that actually does well as well. But actually, Christine had her hand so I kind of sorry interjected there. So please.
No, I
Christine.
was just clapping. It was just a clap.
I think that's quite a cynical approach, though. Yes, I think what we should be trying to champion the message, though, that being sustainable and sustainable in the sense of environmentally friendly and commercially sustainable, they're not mutually exclusive. So I don't think we should shy away from that. And when people are doing
this is what the BCG report says. The BCG report says it's such a tremendous opportunity. And actually RAP a couple of years back, and Dave Jackson knows more about it, but they actually calculate, I think every pound invested in food waste prevention in restaurants has an ROI of like 14 times. So it's really just really good business. It's really good business for the investors here on the call as well as for each and every one of our customers. You're totally right, Jamie.
But if I can come in here,
yeah,
I think there's a kind of meeting here, right? So there's the commercial proposition, and that's really important. But culturally, we're also moving to a place where it's no longer acceptable for, in particular, publicly traded corporations to not to take a passive approach when it comes to climate change, right? And so when you start thinking about net zero ambitions, in particular for food service and food businesses, connecting food waste and net zero is something that's really only starting to happen, I would say, over the last kind of 18 months. Those two things are really starting to become apparent, that if you're going to solve one, you need to solve the other. And I think that the work that Jamie and Too Good To Go, the work that RAP have recently done in the UK from a kind of communications perspective to raise awareness in consumers, that is also something that they can do to reduce their own impact in their homes, but also it's something that they should be demanding that their brands that they purchase from, or their restaurants that they visit, or their staff canteen at the place that they work, that they also take that seriously. And I'd like to move towards a point, in the short term, where it's not acceptable for a business not to know how much they waste. I think we need to move towards that place where it is our responsibility, all of us, and there are solutions, and there are those who are able to take action at scale. But it's all of those component parts together, and the work that Jamie and others are doing in that space on the consumer side also then impacts on the corporate side as well.
And even if they do know how much they waste, we from retailers we're hearing that we have a benchmark, and the benchmark is 1.68% of our turnover, and as long as we don't cross that, we're good. But that business as usual is no longer holds. And plastic, the drive of consumers against plastic has been extremely powerful. It has really resulted in legislation. Well, obviously, the impact of food waste is way, way, way bigger, and we're not getting legislation done. We're not getting consumer action done. So I have to applaud Too Good To Go on this one, but we have to really go over and beyond this.
What do you think is stopping it, Christine? In countries like the US and Europe, why aren't governments taking bold action on this stuff?
So it's interesting. I'm laughing because that's why I went to World Economic Forum a couple years ago and COP and these things, and made it my mission to speak, right before COVID at both of them, because they were not even food was barely on the agenda, let alone food waste. And they're talking about the biggest issues of humanity and climate change, and the number one contributor is not even on the agenda. And it's just mind-boggling. And I think it has to do with, one, we didn't have the data technically, but we kind of did, several years ago, but it's just so hard to measure because it's been an offline industry. So we haven't had the data. And so it's up to us now as entrepreneurs. And I actually love it. I just wish I could be 5 people, because it's like we're trying to solve this huge problem while gathering data for the whole industry. And plus, try to push for legislation. I'm, on the Chamber of Commerce for California. I'm now, trying to do things with the Biden administration and stuff with the Chamber of Commerce. But that's like my side, weekend, like don't have extra time for it job. So we need, everybody to be pushing for these things, because it's on all of us. And the fact is, they're not aware. I literally went on a roadshow the month before COVID to 8 senators in the US with a cheat sheet on food waste, and none of them knew any of the facts. So it's just awareness. And so we've just got to be, shouting at the top of our lungs, getting media like you guys are doing, explaining, educating, and, not just us entrepreneurs pushing for legislation change. So yeah, it's going to take all of us. It's going to take a village. So.
But for some reason, food always seems to be the forgotten ingredient on the political agenda. Like for any of the Europeans on the call, Brexit was not taken into the whole Brexit negotiations, food wasn't taken into consideration.
But it's one of the few things we need to survive. That's what boggles me. It's like we need food and we need water and we need a healthy planet. It's like, this is fundamental. Like, how is anything else important? And then COVID just kind of exacerbated, making people wake up a bit, but we just have to keep that going, anyways. Sorry, Jamie.
Familiarity breeds contempt.
Yeah.
It's just, it's in the Western world, food is there, and it's, there's stuff in the fridge. If it's not in the fridge, you go to the supermarket. It's cheap, so we don't see the value. It's so we have to really bring it home to those in the production system, to the retailers and to their suppliers, that this this is not gonna last. But really, I think it's a very positive action. It's really consumers that are starting to purchase with their conscience, that are starting to go to brands that they believe in, and then that's actually what forward fooding is really celebrating here. So I'm really grateful for that as well.
Are people optimistic, by the way, with Biden's environmental summit on Earth Day, whether actually food will be part of the conversation?
Crazy.
We've got an emphatic yes in the chat, but Christine, Jenny, what do you think?
I think, not to get specifically political, but it's nice that there's room on the agenda and on the media waves these days for these topics to even have space in the first place. I just want to build on that kind of consumer-driven demand side. I would say, and just using the example, even for our own business, if you go and you talk only to the packing house and suppliers, to bring forward a new technology, whatever the case may be, it's viewed as, an input, a cost. And there's already so much pressure, for, price pressure, on them, driven through other parts of the supply chain. The thing that has, for us, I guess, helped the adoption to the greatest extent is like, well, go to your customer's customer and their customer. And so the behavior changes are driven by each of us as consumers really starting to ask more questions and hold, more organizations, accountable to this. So just really using that to reinforce what a lot of the other speakers have already touched on.
Nice. And out of interest, throw it open to all of you. Do you feel like in the battle against food waste, we're now at a point where we have most of the innovations that we need, and it's a question of implementation? It's a question of, governments rolling it out, or we've only touched 2% of the innovations that we need, and we still need hundreds, thousands of new startups and things like that to come and look at different bits of the food system?
I think we're going to be needing a lot more startups. In the Netherlands, for example, 42% of food waste happens at home, and there's hardly any technology to really unleash data. So what we're thinking of actually achieving is, if we can tell a retailer what food he's wasting, and if we can then help a supplier optimize production, we can also actually use the loyalty schemes to incentivize people at home to cook with the products that are in their fridge that they have to eat tonight or tomorrow night. But for this for this data in the system is required. And so a date label is a great way of actually having item level data. But the current date labels are crap. You know, they're called EN13 because they're just 13 little bars. They don't say anything about the individual item. So we need to get more data into the system, because that way we can optimize it from Christina's farm all the way to what Jenny is doing with the avocado on your fruit bowl. We need data for that, and we're not going to get there otherwise. And we need to be generous in actually sharing the data among the silos.
Yeah.
My quick answer to that is, you know, on this call are amazing foundational supply chain solutions, but we're on certain geographies, you know, certain solutions. 8 out of the top 20 solutions for reducing climate change and Project Drawdown are tied to food. And there are a million things under each one of those. Refrigeration management, you know, one of the top ones as well. And so, you know, we might be solving it for in developed countries, but then there's developing countries, you know, like I say that our solution, we want to be global, but the food waste isn't wasted at the farm level in some developing countries because of a lack of, you know, a marketplace. They don't have roads, they don't have trucks, they don't have refrigeration management. It's a totally different problem to solve. So I think it's not necessarily, you know, millions of people needing to start companies, but we definitely need way more faster. I mean, I can count on, you know, a little more than 2 hands, the major companies in existence globally, you know, solving food waste. I mean, that is nothing given how urgent and huge of a problem this is. So the more we have working on this, the faster, the better. So
in our space, we're in food service and hospitality, we're really scratching the surface. It's barely, you know, we estimate around $100 billion worth of food is wasted in kind of hospitality and out of home environments every year, and we're saving $40 million of that. So we're not getting anywhere near it. But I think we're going to start to approach a tipping point. So, you know, we work with most of the big hotel chains around the world. They've all set public targets to halve food waste. You know, working with big contract caterers, they're all doing the same. And so the pace of change needs to be faster. We need to kind of evidence and show the impact, and we all need to work as a group in terms of the innovation communities. But I'm really encouraged by where the conversation is going and where those commitments would lead us. And what we really need now is some kind of leaders in the space to really take the charge. Like from our perspective, one of those, we work globally, like I said, with IKEA. That they're probably going to hit their target, you know, in a very short period of time, and they'll be the first, you know, major global brand to halve food waste. That will be an incredible achievement, and I think then that will kind of open the floodgates for more to do the same. So my wife calls me a tragic optimist, so maybe that's kind of, we all surely are, given what we do here. But I'm really optimistic about what the next couple of years holds for actually kind of scaling impact rather than, you know, pilots and kind of nice case studies.
Yeah. I'm always amazed, you know, I think most of these companies, they're making very public declarations of things they will do in 2030. And if I think back to, say, the London Olympics, it feels like it was yesterday. And so, like, this is going to be upon them before they know what happens. And it's going to be at that moment that, you know, you guys see exponential growth, and hopefully we see the problem start to go the other way.
Mathematically, if we want to halve food waste by 2030, we have to start showing double-digit reductions next year. Otherwise, it's mathematically unachievable. So 2030 is, I mean, people that are talking about 2030 and are not actually achieving that double-digit reduction this year, they are slightly beside the truth. Let's put it that way.
Nice. So I'm going to go out to the audience. There's some great questions that have been coming in through the chat, and do keep them coming. We'll definitely be taking them. Question here for you, Jamie, from a lady called Cherry Dejos, and she says, too good to go. That a recent article said it might be better to donate food surplus as opposed to sell it, kind of putting the commercial onus onto the business and not onto the consumer. What do you think about this?
Yeah, I mean, it's a challenging question. So thanks for putting that to me first, Joe. And look, I mean, with us, with the way that we operate with businesses, it's to ensure that this food is eaten and enjoyed, other than going to waste. And that's fundamentally the line of business in which we're in. So it's working with businesses of any size to ensure that their produce, that their food, the things that they've spent their time, their money, their labor, etc. on, can be eaten and enjoyed rather than being wasted. Now, what we aren't doing is taking food away from charitable organizations. That's not one of the business that we're in. I think what you're touching on there is, you know, this I guess this separation between two really important issues, one being food waste and food loss as an environmental issue, and then food insecurity and food poverty as a social issue. And our primary focus is really looking at reducing food waste from an environmental message. And often that's by creating a solution which is financially viable for a business. So I think, you know, it's often looking at what the best solution is for that business at hand. But as I say, in a nutshell, our focus is on looking at this from an environmental message. We are not trying to take food away from voluntary organizations, but rather trying to work with them. So in the UK, we have a partnership with FareShare, which is the largest food redistribution charity. And across Europe, we work with FIBA, which is the Federation for European Food Banks. So we're always looking to see how much we can help in this space of food insecurity, yet our primary focus is looking at it from a environmental lens.
Nice, thank you. And a tough question, well answered. And I think, you know, it sounds from so many of you today, one of the solutions, one of the things we're working towards is making people value the food system more. And for better or for worse, value and money go hand in hand in people's minds. And I think, you know, what you're doing speaks to that well. David Catt, we've got a question for you here, which, you know, it's been touched on by a few people around how convenience is an important thing in driving our food decisions and our food behaviors. How important do you think it is that the consumer understands the kind of the technology and the AI behind what you're doing? Or is it really, you just want to keep the shopping experience as it is today? You go in, you make a snap decision and you leave, or do you want them to engage with what you're doing with that technology? That's a question from Anna Booth.
Which is a great question. The easiest way of getting behavioral change is to actually not changing too much. So we are actually we don't need to explain the AI. It's just, you know, there's a good deal. So there's a good deal to be had. So the way it works, for example, in the Dutch retailer Albert Heijn, they for the last 10 years they've had a sticker which they slap on the last day, and it just says 35%. But on the last day, your chicken is already blue, and the salad is already bloated. So what we actually are able to do, and what we explain in retail, is if you mark down slightly earlier, but only for those items that are at risk of expiring, you don't have to discount by 35%. You can discount by 7 or by 11%, as long as the food is in a better quality, and there's nothing to be ashamed of. So actually what we do is we make use of the existing process of people, you know, getting this little nice dopamine rush of getting a good deal. You know, you find a deal, you buy it, and you're spending less, and you're also wasting less. So that's what we're trying to do, and you don't have to explain the AI for that. Although we're glad to, but you don't have to be data scientists to do good for the planet.
Great, thank you, David. Tough question here. Maybe let's come to Jenny and David. David Jackson, that is. This is from Chloe Stewart, and she asks, if you were, the head of government, the head of the free world tomorrow, what one piece of food waste legislation would you pass, and why?
Do you want to go first, Jenny? Do you want me to go first?
Like
I can talk about what we're lobbying for at the moment. Maybe I kick us off and you can give a better answer. But the most immediate thing for us is to mandate measurement. So there's a consultation that's about to kick off in the UK, for example, to mandate food businesses of a certain size just to report on how much they're wasting. And this goes back to that idea that I was floating in the panel conversation around it really not being okay not to know, and that becoming something that is a reframe, at least in our sector. And so I don't think there's a magic silver bullet, otherwise hopefully somebody would have found that already. But policy wise, I think if globally food service businesses of a certain size were mandated to report the amount of food that they wasted, there would be a lot more action, a lot more quickly, and it would become part of the conversation. And so kind of in our kind of slither of the food waste ecosystem, I think that's definitely something that we would like to see.
Yeah, knowledge, power, change. I think a great thing to be lobbying for. Jenny.
Yeah, my feel would be on that, because you do need to measure it just to kind of know your benchmarks and your baselines as a starting point. What we're encouraged by, and it's only kind of like maybe, let's say, retailer maybe led or just in pockets, not industry wide across the fresh produce chain, but it's really to demonstrate, like folks actually need to, it's almost not necessarily like a certification, but as part of your supply chain qualification, like asking the players, like, what are you doing, to improve your footprint, or in this case, it'd be like waste specifically. So it was actually like, it's not intended to be like, let's say like punishment or whatever, but you think about different ways in which behavior is incentivized. And it's like, well, my ability to either retain or gain new business is actually to answer to an investment into the right initiatives to address those kinds of questions. So of course the truck is driving by right now, sorry. But that's where we're kind of coming from, is actually make it a part of some of the, the standards to a certain extent. But what scheme that looks like, we're maybe not kind of ready to wholly map that out yet, but we are seeing that as, again, like your customer and your customer's customers are really like asking for that demonstration, and that investment can be, let's say, like qualified or audited, to demonstrate you really are following through on those efforts. That's sort of where we see it going, but you do need the information as a starting point, to David's point.
And you need carbon tax.
Nice. Carbon tax, measurement, build it into the things that companies have to report on. I think these are all great solutions. You guys should be elected promptly.
It needs an effective roadmap as well. I think, if we're looking at it from a more of a European lens, in the UK we have the 2008 Climate Act, which involves a carbon budget. We then had Boris Johnson, who announced yesterday that the UK would be reducing greenhouse gas emissions by 78% by 2035, I believe, which was on 1990 levels, which was an increase of 68%. Yet there's been no discussion as to how we're going to get there. So it needs to, we need to have a budget plan which actually explains how this is going to happen, and specifically looking at our food system as one of the main contributors to this.
Yeah. So we're coming to the end of our time, unfortunately, because I feel we could go on for much longer. So many wonderful insights coming out and great comments coming in from the audience as well. There's a question that's come in for you, Christine, specifically, but it's something I'd like to put to all of you. About 60% probably of the audience we've got here today are founders, entrepreneurs, people who run their own ventures or want to run their own ventures. And so my parting question to all of you, and starting with you, Christine, is what advice would you give to your younger self if you were to launch a business again in food waste? And yeah, what would you say to the other entrepreneurs in the room?
Yeah, just start sooner. Really, I mean, I think this was due to a data, situation and awareness. But technically, I did. Oh gosh, my AirPod's falling out. I did spend 8 months going in the wrong direction. So what I would say is be truly listening to where and I'm sorry, there's a doorbell going off, of course, but truly being open to listening to what is truly needed. I was avoiding the voices in my head and what the customers were really saying for 8 months, and I almost went broke doing it. And then finally I, said, wait a minute, okay, if this isn't working because I need to become the supplier, then I need to become a supplier and I need to solve the supply problem. So I think I would have saved a lot of money and pain and time if I had just, you've got to go in different directions, but like pivot faster and test things more and faster. That's what I would say.
Great advice. Thank you. David Jackson.
So I'm not a founder, but I was employee number 4 at Winnow. And at the beginning, it's brutal because you're knocking on every door and often you're not getting the responses perhaps that you'd like. And someone wiser than me said, it's 99% they're too busy and 1% they hate you. So like, don't take that too personally, like keep, as the old adage goes, you don't ask, you don't get, and keep knocking on those doors as much as you can, because once traction starts to build, those conversations become a lot easier. But I wish somebody had said that to me after my kind of 20th cold call that I hadn't booked a meeting with.
And we'll have to do another version of this podcast to hear about the 1% that hate you. Jenny.
Maybe to build on, because absolutely yes to what Christine and David have just said. The build then is like, it's like a stamina. Like you just, to be a change agent, like the job never stops, like you're kind of taking a lot of resistance from, folks who's in, what they're measured by and what they're incentivized are just different from what you're trying to bring. And so there is a lot of resistance. And at some points, everyone goes like, oh yeah, duh, of course we should have been doing it this way all along, but that takes some time. And I think like maybe, for the passion that entrepreneurs bring and that sort of like ownership and achievement, like you can also just run yourself like ragged. And so you've got to manage to a certain extent your energy and your emotion, because you're there to serve, you and your organization and, the others on your team as well. So I just think it's the long haul for all the reasons that Christine and David had said. So the stamina part of it being maybe a little bit like attentive, I guess, to your energy. It's so kind of cheesy to say, but I think maybe like really important, because we need all these great ideas and innovations to like come to fruition, pardon the pun, but we need everyone here to be able to see it through with their team. So
definitely good advice. Businesses are made up of people, and if the people burn out, there's no business, right? So very wise words. David Catt.
Yeah, so I was a very early investor in Oasis as well, and I had been working with the founder team earlier. We righted some wrongs, so we were always extremely critical, and I could do that looking from a little bit from the outside in, and being critical is also part of that is also really listening to the customer of your customer. And that's a big lesson we learned. We thought first that we would really make the retailers happy, until we discovered that really we have to take it from the perspective of their customer, of the consumer. So that's one. And then the second thing is, which really ties into to what Jenny was saying, is that we're all doing this because we love what we're doing. And we get a lot of enthusiasm and we get a lot of drive, and we're probably putting in way too well, not way too much time, because you know that time is the only thing we have, and we know that that time is limited. But keeping that enthusiasm in your team is key to actually getting to the result. And all of the companies that I know that are on here, their staff is just, you know, tremendously motivated. But they also have to look at who they're doing it for. They're not just doing it for their customer, they're also doing it one relation down, the customer of their customer. And if you keep those two things aligned, well, we're going to get there.
Nice. Well, yeah, I mean, just 1.5 hours with the 5 of you, and I've been imbued with so much enthusiasm that, you know, I feel like I could go off and start something. So it's definitely a contagious thing that you've all got. Jamie, finally to you, your piece of advice.
Yeah, I feel the pressure now, being the last one. But no, I think, you know, what's just been said before really hits the nail on the head. Whether it's keeping that passion going, as David said, or it's that energy management was said prior to that, or even just that perseverance. But I think, you know, for myself, the one thing which has been inherent in our cultural DNA is just keeping it simple. Not trying to overcomplicate things, and you know, that has been something which has just stayed with us and really put us in good stead. It was just by cutting back the bullshit. I don't know if I'm allowed to swear on here, but you know, keeping it as simple as possible and just going back to what that issue is and creating a solution that just makes sense.
Amazing. And totally allowed to swear. So, you know, get creative on the chat. If you want to curse to close this out, you're welcome. That takes us to the end of our time together. So a huge thank you to all of our panelists. Your insights, your passion, what you've achieved have been truly, truly impressive. And I know that food waste is going to be a shrinking problem with you guys in the driving seat. So thank you very much. I'm going to hand back to Alessio, who's going to wrap this whole thing out.
Thank you so much, Joseph, and all the panelists. I mean, I'm speechless. Honestly, I think we couldn't think of a better set of panelists to close our series of webinars about the FoodTech 500. What I've learned myself during this webinar is I think it would require a thesis of a dissertation of a master degree. The feedback we received in the chat has been amazing. So again, I just want to thank everyone for joining us, but most of the panelists from taking the time. I know how busy you guys are, and I really appreciate you taking the time to share your insights with us. Yes, swearing is allowed. Yes, doorbells or dogs barking, anything, you know, that happen these days, I think is absolutely acceptable. So no worries whatsoever. I'm just going to wrap it up now. Let me just share my screen and thank again our amazing panelists one more time for sharing their insights with us. We won't have any further webinars for this series, but we're planning to potentially add more, well, to run more actually in the summer. But if there is anything we can do to anyone who have attended, or even, you know, to the great panelists we had tonight, please do not hesitate to share, to reach out to us. They send just an email to info@forwardfooding.com, and one of our team members will try to address it as soon as possible. This video will then be recorded and be added on YouTube. So without further ado, with 1 minute of delay, let me just wrap it up here, and thanks everyone again for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Amazing, and keep up the amazing work. But I guess the amount of feedback we received in the chat speaks with itself. So I don't think it's even worth saying anything else. Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Cheers.